There are men who ride into towns looking for trouble. And then there are men who ride in carrying it, quiet as a held breath, heavy as the iron on their hip. The stranger who walked into Dry Hollow that afternoon belonged to the second kind. Nobody saw him coming. Nobody heard his horse. One moment the dusty street was empty under a sun that bleached the wood gray, and the next, he was standing on the porch of Hartley's general store, watching a woman get turned away from a sack of flour she had already counted her coins for. She had 3 children waiting in a wagon. Her hands were shaking. The shopkeeper's voice was loud enough to carry, on purpose, so the whole street could hear what kind of woman she was. And she just stood there, taking it the way a person takes a slap they've taken 100 times before. The stranger didn't move. He just listened. Before we begin, tell me, where are you watching from? Sending love your way, wherever the road finds you tonight. Because what happened next in Dry Hollow wasn't a robbery. It wasn't a shootout. It was something quieter and far more dangerous. A promise whispered between 2 strangers on a wooden porch, 6 simple words that would unbury every secret that town had buried 12 years deep. Ride with me. I'll fill your table tonight. She looked up, and she knew his face. Her name was Ellen Carver, and she had not been called by her first name in almost 4 years. In Dry Hollow they called her the Widow Carver, or sometimes just her, the way you might say that when pointing at something you'd rather not name. She lived 2 miles out of town in a sun-warped house that had once belonged to her husband, and before him to his father, and before that to no one anyone remembered. The porch sagged. The roof leaked in 2 places she had learned to set buckets under without thinking. The well had gone half bitter the summer her husband died, and she drank the water anyway, because there was no other water to drink. That morning she had counted her coins 3 times on the kitchen table while her children slept. 87 cents. A sack of flour was 60. A pound of salt pork was 20. That left 7 cents for a twist of sugar, if Hartley was feeling generous, which he never was, but she allowed herself the small fantasy on the wagon ride into town. She made her children sit in the back under a piece of canvas. The oldest, Sam, was 9 and serious as a judge. The middle one, Mary, was 6 and sang under her breath when she was scared. The baby, Tom, was 3 and didn't yet understand what hunger meant when it stayed too long. You stay in the wagon, Ellen told them. I'll only be a minute. Sam nodded the way grown men nod. Mary kept singing. Tom reached for her hand and she pretended not to see, because if she felt his small fingers in hers, she would not be able to do what she had come to do. The bell over Hartley's door rang like a thin complaint when she pushed it open. Inside, the store smelled of cured leather and coffee beans and the dry sweet of molasses. 2 men were standing at the counter. Hartley himself, broad and red-faced under a thinning crown of hair, and Pastor Riems, who pretended not to see her. Pastor Riems was very good at pretending not to see her. He had been pretending not to see her every Sunday for almost 4 years. Mr. Hartley, she said, and laid her coins on the counter, one by one, the way a card player lays down a losing hand because there is nothing left to bluff with. 60 for the flour, 20 for the pork, and I'd like a halfpenny of sugar if you can spare it. Hartley looked at the coins. He did not touch them. He looked at her, and his eyes had that flat, satisfied light that some men get when they're about to be cruel and have an audience for it. Mrs. Carver, he said, loud, very loud. Your husband owed me $4.11 when he died. I've been a patient man. I've been a Christian man. He glanced at Pastor Riems, who did not look up from the ledger he was pretending to read. But patience and Christianity don't put bread on my table. I have the money for the flour, she said quietly. Right here. And what about the $4? I don't have $4, Mr. Hartley. I've never had $4 all at once in my life. Then you don't eat from my store. She felt the heat climb up her throat. She did not let it reach her face. Please, she said. It's not for me. It's for the children. Hartley's mouth opened to say something even worse. She could see it forming, see the small pleasure of it gathering at the corner of his lip, and that was the moment the bell over the door rang for the second time. A shadow fell across the floor. Long, narrow, edged in dust. Hartley's mouth closed. The man who walked in did not take off his hat. He did not nod to Pastor Riems. He did not look at Ellen at all, not directly, but she felt him register her, the way you feel a hand pass close to a candle without touching it. He was tall, lean in the way that comes from years of going without, not from vanity. His coat was the color of old ash, and his gun belt was worn smooth at the buckle where a thumb had rested 10,000 times. His face was burned dark by sun on one side and shadowed by hat brim on the other, and there was a thin scar that ran from his right ear down into the collar of his shirt, the kind of scar a man gets when something sharp has tried to kill him and almost succeeded. He walked to the counter. He stood beside Ellen, not too close, not too far. Close enough that Hartley had to look at him. "Heard you tell the lady she don't eat," the stranger said. His voice was quiet. Quiet the way a creek is quiet just before it drops off a cliff. Hartley straightened. "This isn't your business, mister." "No," the stranger agreed. "It isn't." He laid a coin on the counter. A gold piece, bright as a small sun against the dark wood. It made a sound, when it landed, that every man in that store felt in his teeth. "That covers the flour," the stranger said, "and the pork, and the sugar, and the $4.11 her husband owed you, and whatever you were about to say next, that I'd rather you didn't." Hartley stared at the coin. He did not pick it up. He could not seem to make himself pick it up. The stranger finally turned his head, and for the first time, he looked at Ellen Carver fully. His eyes were gray, pale gray, the color of a sky right before a storm. And Ellen, who had taken so many things in her life without flinching, felt her knees go soft, because she knew that color. She had known it 12 years ago, in a town that no longer existed, in a life she had buried so deep she had almost convinced herself it had never happened at all. He leaned slightly toward her, just enough that only she could hear. "Ride with me," he said. "I'll fill your table tonight." And outside, in the wagon, her little girl was still singing under her breath. Ellen did not answer him in the store. She could not. Her tongue had gone to leather, and her hands had gone to ice, and somewhere behind her ribs a thing she had spent 12 years smothering had opened one eye and looked at her, slow and patient, the way an old dog looks at the man who used to be cruel to it. She gathered her coins back into her palm. She did not look at the stranger again. She walked out of Hartley's store with her chin held the way a woman holds her chin when she is afraid the wind will take it from her if she doesn't grip it tight. The bell rang behind her. The sun hit her like a slap. Sam was sitting up in the wagon, watching the door. He had seen the stranger go in. 9 years old, and already he had a way of measuring men the way other boys measured shadows. "Mama," he said. "Who was that?" "Hush, Sam." "Mama, you're shaking." "Hush." She climbed up onto the wagon seat. She picked up the reins. Her hands did not work the way they were supposed to. The leather felt strange against her fingers, like she had forgotten the shape of her own palms. Behind her, Mary had stopped singing. Tom was reaching for her again, and this time she let him take her finger. The stranger came out of the store. He did not look at her. He walked to a horse she had not noticed before, a tall bay gelding tied at the far end of the rail, standing so still it might have been carved out of the dust. He swung up into the saddle the way a man swings up onto something he has been on 1,000 times. He turned the horse south. He did not ride toward her. He rode away from the wagon, away from Hartley's, away from the curious eyes that had begun to gather in doorways up and down the street. But before he passed the last building, he turned his head, just slightly, and tipped his hat brim down. Once, toward her. She understood. He was telling her where to find him. He was telling her he would wait. She slapped the reins and the wagon lurched forward, and she did not look back, because if she looked back she might turn it around and follow him right then. And she could not do that, not with the children watching, not with the whole town watching, not until she knew if the man in the gray coat was who she thought he was, or the ghost of who she thought he was, or something worse. The ride home was a long one. The road from Dry Hollow ran between two low hills the color of beaten copper, and the wind came up out of the south the way it always did in late summer, dry and full of small stones. Ellen drove with her eyes on the mule's ears and her mind 12 years back, in a place called Beaumont Crossing, which had been a town once and was now nothing but a name on a map nobody bothered to print anymore. In Beaumont Crossing she had not been Ellen Carver. She had been Ellen Hayes, 17 years old, with hair the color of new wheat and a laugh her father said could turn a bad day around. Her father had run the livery. Her mother had been dead since Ellen was 6. Her brother Caleb had been the kind of brother who taught her to shoot a rifle when she was 11 and told her she'd be better than him before she was 12, and there had been a boy. He had come to the livery one spring morning with a horse that had thrown a shoe, and he had paid in silver and stayed 3 days, and on the 3rd day he had taken Ellen down to the river and told her his name and asked if he could come back. His name had been Wes Tanner. He had come back. He had come back 6 times that summer. On the 7th time he had asked her father for her hand, and her father had said yes, because Wes Tanner was the kind of man fathers said yes to, quiet, hard-working, with hands that did not lie and eyes that did not wander. They were supposed to be married in October, but in September the riders came. Ellen did not let herself remember that night in pieces. She remembered it whole or not at all, and most days she chose not at all. But the wagon was rolling and the wind was dry and her hands were shaking, and she could not stop the whole thing from rising up in her like floodwater. 8 men, maybe 9. They had come for her brother, who had testified against one of their cousins in a stage robbery the year before. They had burned the livery. They had killed her father in the doorway of his own house. They had killed Caleb in the street. And when Wes Tanner had come riding in at the sound of the gunfire, 3 of them had been waiting for him on the road, and they had shot his horse out from under him and shot him 4 times where he lay, and they had ridden away laughing. Ellen had crawled to him in the dark. She had held his head in her lap. He had not been breathing. There had been so much blood she could not find his face under it. She had buried him herself, 2 days later, in a grave she dug with her own hands because there was no one left in Beaumont Crossing to help her. She had not put a marker on the grave because markers were for the living, and the living had all gone. She had walked out of Beaumont Crossing on foot. She had walked for 4 days. She had ended up in Dry Hollow with nothing but the dress on her back and the name Hayes still on her tongue, and the first man who had been kind to her had been Jonas Carver, who had a small farm and a quiet way and no questions in him. She had married Jonas because she was tired, and she had loved him, in the small worn way a person can love after the big love has been buried, and she had given him 3 children, and when he died of fever 4 years ago she had not cried, because she had used up all her crying in one September night a long time before. She had buried Wes Tanner with her own hands. She knew because she had touched him. She had held him. She had felt the cold come into him. So the man in Hartley's store could not be Wes Tanner. But his eyes had been gray, pale gray, the color of a sky right before a storm. And his scar, that scar that ran from his right ear down into his collar, it ran exactly where the 4th bullet had gone in. She pulled the wagon up at the gate of her sagging house. Sam jumped down to open it. Mary helped Tom out of the back. Ellen sat with the reins in her hands and looked south, where the road bent around the copper-colored hill and disappeared. Somewhere out there, the stranger was waiting. She did not know yet if she was going to him to find a miracle or to confirm a grave. She waited until the children were asleep. She fed them what she had, the last of the cornmeal boiled thin, with a spoonful of bacon grease stirred through to make it taste like something. Sam ate without complaining. Mary asked twice for more and stopped asking when she saw her mother's face. Tom fell asleep with the spoon still in his hand, and Ellen carried him to the pallet by the stove and laid him down and stood over him a long time, watching his small chest rise and fall. Then she went to the cedar chest at the foot of her bed, and she opened it for the first time in 12 years. Under the folded quilts, under the wedding dress she had never worn, under a packet of letters tied with a piece of brown string, there was a gun belt. It had been her father's. The leather was stiff with age, but the pistol in it was clean, because she had cleaned it once a year every year, in the dark, with the door locked, the way some women pray. She buckled it on under her shawl. She kissed each of her children on the forehead. She wrote a note for Sam that said, "I will be back before sunrise. If I am not, ride to Mrs. Doyle and tell her to come." She left it on the kitchen table under the empty sugar tin. Then she walked out into the night. The moon was a thin curve the color of bone. The road south of her house was a pale ribbon between black fields. She walked with her hand resting on the butt of her father's gun, not because she meant to use it, but because the weight of it was the only thing keeping her upright. A mile out, she saw the fire. It was a small fire, careful, the kind a man builds when he does not want to be seen but knows he will be found anyway. It burned in a hollow off the road, behind a stand of cottonwoods, and the smoke went up thin and straight because there was no wind in the hollow. She saw the bay horse first, tied to a low branch, cropping at the dry grass. Then she saw him. He was sitting on a flat stone by the fire, his hat off, his hands open and resting on his knees. He had set out a tin cup of coffee on the stone beside him. The cup was for her. He had been waiting. He did not look up when she came into the firelight. He let her stand there as long as she needed. When she finally spoke, her voice did not sound like her own. "Take off your shirt." He looked up then, just his eyes, not his head. "Ellen, take it off." He did, slowly, without argument. He unbuttoned it from the collar down, and he pulled it off his shoulders, and he sat there in the firelight with his chest bare, and Ellen Carver saw what she had come to see. For scars. One in the right shoulder. One in the chest just under the collarbone. One in the side below the ribs. One at the base of the throat where the fourth bullet had gone in and somehow not killed him. She did not move for a long time. "I buried you," she said at last. Her voice was very quiet. "I dug the grave myself. I held you. You were not breathing. I know. You were dead, Wes. I was close. Don't." She took a step back from him. Her hand had found the butt of her father's gun again without her telling it to. "Don't you dare. Don't you dare sit there and say close like the word means anything. I buried you. I have lived 12 years on the other side of that grave. I married a man. I had 3 children. I have grieved you every single day, and you are telling me close." He did not answer. He did not put his shirt back on. He let her say it. "Where were you?" she whispered. "Mexico, mostly. The first 2 years I don't remember. A woman in a place called San Pablo. She pulled the bullets out of me. 2 of them. The other 2 are still in. I came up out of the fever in the spring, and I could not remember my own name for a while. When I did remember it, I remembered yours next. And then I remembered the men. The men. The 8 men. I have been looking for them, Ellen. 12 years. The fire popped. A small shower of sparks went up and died before they reached the cottonwood branches. "How many?" she said. 6. 6 what? 6 are in the ground." She closed her eyes. "The other 2? He was quiet a moment. He picked up the tin cup of coffee that had been waiting for her, and he turned it slowly in his hands. "One of them," he said, "is Pastor Riem's." Her eyes opened. "The other one," he said, "is Hartley." The fire popped again. Somewhere out beyond the cottonwoods, a coyote called once, and another answered from very far away, and then the night went still in the way nights go still when something has been said that cannot be unsaid. Ellen sat down, not because she meant to, because her legs would not hold her. "Riem's," she said. "Riem's baptized my children. Riem's was the one who shot your father. Hartley sold me thread last winter. He gave me a cup of cider once when Tom had the croup. Hartley was the one who lit the livery." She put her face in her hands. Wes Tanner, because that was who he was. She could not pretend otherwise now, not with the 4 scars in front of her in the firelight. Wes Tanner did not move toward her. He did not try to touch her. He sat very still on his stone and let her break apart on the other side of the fire by herself, because he understood, in the way men learn to understand after 12 years of riding alone, that some grief is a private country, and a man who steps into it uninvited becomes a trespasser forever. When she finally lifted her face, her cheeks were wet, but her eyes were dry, and there was something in them that had not been there in 12 years. I won't let you kill them, she said. He nodded once. He had expected that. I'll do it myself. He did not nod that time. He just looked at her across the fire, and the look on his face was the look of a man who has ridden a very long way to hear exactly those words, and is now afraid of what they mean. He did not try to talk her out of it. That was the thing that broke her, finally. Not the scars, not the years, but the way Wes Tanner sat there in the firelight and did not try to talk her out of it. A worse man would have argued. A weaker man would have begged. A man who did not know her would have said, Ellen, you have 3 children, you cannot do this. Wes only said, then we do it together. And we do it right. Right? Quiet. Legal if we can. Loud if we can't. But we do not leave those children without a mother. That is the one line. She looked at him a long time. The fire was down to coals now. The stars had wheeled a quarter turn since she had sat down on the stone across from him. Why didn't you come back? She said. When you remembered. Why didn't you come back to me first? Because I did. She stared at him. 4 years ago, he said. I came up out of Mexico. I rode into Beaumont Crossing and found the burned house and the burned livery and 3 graves with no names on them, and I rode every town within 100 miles asking for a yellow-haired girl named Ellen Hayes. Nobody had heard of her. Nobody would have. You weren't Ellen Hayes anymore. He looked down at his hands. I found you in November, in Dry Hollow. I came in on a Sunday and I stood across the street from the church and I watched you walk out of it with 3 children holding onto your skirts. And there was a man with you. Jonas. Yes. Jonas was dying that November. I didn't know that. I saw a woman with a husband and 3 children and a life. And I had not been a man for a long time, Ellen. I had been a thing with bullets in it that walked from town to town looking for other things to put bullets into. I had no house. I had no name anyone would say out loud. I had killed 3 men by then, and I was going to kill more. And I looked at you on the church steps with your little boy holding your hand, and I thought, what does a woman like that need with a ghost? So you rode away. I rode away. For 4 years. For 4 years. And what brought you back? He was quiet a long moment. I heard about Hartley, he said. I had been hunting the last 2 for a long time. I knew their names, but I did not know where they had gone to ground. A man in El Paso said there was a storekeeper up in Dry Hollow who used to ride with Cole Garrett's crew, and a preacher who had been with him. I did not put it together until I rode in this morning and saw the name on the store. And then I walked in to look at his face, and I was going to wait until dark and find him alone. And instead I found you standing at his counter with 87 cents and 3 children in a wagon. And he stopped. He was about to call you something, he said. I saw it in his mouth. And I have killed men for less, Ellen. I have killed men for much less than what he was about to say to the mother of 3 children in front of God and a pastor on a Tuesday afternoon. The fire was almost out. She got up. She walked around it. She sat down on the stone beside him, close, but not touching. She could feel the heat of him through her shawl. 12 years. She could feel the 12 years. Tell me how we do it right, she said. He told her. It would take 3 days. 3 days and the ledger book that Hartley kept in the locked drawer under his counter. The same ledger Pastor Riems had been pretending to read that morning. Wes had heard about that ledger from a dying man in Tucson 2 years back. Cole Garrett's crew had kept records of everything they had stolen and everyone they had killed, because Cole Garrett had been the kind of man who believed in evidence as insurance. You turn on me, the ledger turns on you. Garrett had been dead 9 years. The ledger had passed to Hartley, who had used it the way Garrett had, to keep his old crew quiet, to keep Riems in his pulpit, to keep himself behind his counter selling thread to widows. If they could get the ledger, they could take it to the federal marshal in Lawton. They could put Hartley and Riems on a rope without firing a shot. The law would do it for them. And if we can't get the ledger? Wes looked into the coals. Then we do it loud. She sat with that for a long time. There's a third way, she said finally. He turned his head. I work at the church, she said. I clean it on Thursdays. Pastor Riems leaves his keys on a hook by the door. He has a key to Hartley's store. They drink together on Thursday nights. I've seen it. Riems goes over after dark, and they sit in the back room, and they drink whiskey, and they laugh about things I never understood until tonight. Wes did not move. Tomorrow is Thursday, Ellen said. He looked at her. Really looked. The pale gray eyes in the firelight, and the woman across from him who had buried him with her own hands and was now telling him how to take the key off the hook. Ellen, he said quietly, are you sure? She thought about Tom asleep with the spoon still in his hand. She thought about Mary singing under her breath in the wagon. She thought about Sam, 9 years old, watching the door of Hartley's store with the eyes of a grown man. She thought about her father in the doorway. She thought about Caleb in the street. She thought about the boy on the riverbank 12 years ago who had said his name and asked if he could come back. I am sure, she said. He nodded. He reached out, then, for the first time since she had walked into the firelight. He took her hand. Just her hand. He did not pull her toward him. He did not say anything more. He just held her hand in his, the way a man holds something he has been afraid to touch for 12 years for fear it will turn to ash. Her fingers closed around his. They sat that way until the coals went black. When she walked home in the dark, the moon was gone and the stars were very bright, and she did not feel afraid, which surprised her. She had thought she would feel afraid. She felt instead the way a person feels when they have set down a load they did not know they had been carrying. In the kitchen, Sam was still asleep at the table. He had been trying to wait up for her. The note was still under the sugar tin. She kissed the top of his head and carried him to bed, and he did not wake. Tomorrow was Thursday. Thursday came up gray. The sky over Dry Hollow had been clear for 16 days. But on Thursday morning, a bank of low cloud rolled in from the west and sat on the town like a hand pressing down, and the air went thick and the dogs would not stop barking. Mrs. Doyle came at noon to take the children for the afternoon, because Ellen had told her she had cleaning to do at the church and a long walk after. Mrs. Doyle was 60 and widowed and asked no questions. She had buried 2 husbands and 3 children of her own and had long ago run out of room for other people's business. She took Sam and Mary and Tom by the hands and led them out the gate, and Tom looked back once and waved, and Ellen waved back, and then she went inside and closed the door and stood with her back against it and breathed for a count of 30. Then she got to work. She wore her cleaning dress, the gray one, the one Pastor Riems had seen her in 100 Thursdays. She did not bring her father's gun. Wes had told her not to. If they find a gun on you, the whole thing dies. You are a woman cleaning a church. That is all you are today. She walked the 2 miles into town. The clouds got lower. By the time she reached the church, the first drops of rain were hitting the dust and raising small puffs of it, the way rain does at the beginning of a long dry season's end. The church was empty. It always was on Thursday afternoons. Pastor Riems came in around 5 to lock up. Ellen had 4 hours. She did not need 4 hours. She needed 4 minutes. The keys hung on a hook beside the back door, on a leather thong, 3 of them. The church door, the rectory, and a small brass one she had never paid attention to before. She lifted the thong off the hook. She slid the brass key off the ring. She put the other 2 back. She slipped the brass key into the small pocket sewn into the inside of her skirt, the one she had stitched there last night by candlelight. Then she cleaned the church. She cleaned it properly. She swept the floor. She wiped down the pews. She polished the brass candlesticks on the altar with a rag and a little vinegar. She did it slowly and well, because if Pastor Riems came back early and found her gone, the whole thing was finished. And if he came back and found the church half cleaned, he would know something was wrong. By 4 o'clock she was done. She hung her apron on the peg. She walked out the front door of the church into the rain, which was coming down steady now, and she walked through the alley behind Main Street, and she did not look at anyone, and no one looked at her, because the rain had driven the town indoors. Wes was waiting in the alley behind Hartley's. He was leaning against the wall under the eave, his hat low, his coat darker with wet. He did not speak. She slipped him the brass key. He turned to the back door of the store. The lock clicked. He pushed the door open and they went inside. The back room of Hartley's smelled of whiskey and tobacco and damp burlap. There was a small iron stove, cold. A table with 2 chairs and 2 glasses still on it from the Thursday before. a row of barrels along the wall, a locked drawer in the bottom of an old roll-top desk. Wes knelt by the desk. He took out a small set of picks from his coat pocket. His hands worked the way hands work when they have done a thing many times in many bad places. The drawer opened in under a minute. The ledger was there. It was bound in black leather, fat with paper, the kind of book a man keeps for a long time. Wes lifted it out. He opened it on the desk. He turned a page. Another. Ellen leaned over his shoulder. Names, dates, towns, amounts. Beaumont Crossing, September 14th, livery and house, $0, 3 killed, and then names. Her father's name, Caleb's name, and below that, in the same hand, one girl, witness, status unconfirmed. She had been a line item with status unconfirmed. She did not breathe for a moment. Then she did. "Take it," she said. "Take it and go." Wes closed the ledger. He tucked it inside his coat. He stood up, and the bell over the front door of the store rang. They froze. Voices. 2 of them. Hartley, loud and wet from the rain. Pastor Riems, quieter. The voice she had heard read scripture over her dead husband. "Told you that woman would come back. They always come back. She'll be in here tomorrow begging again." "I'd let her beg." The 2 men laughed. Wes's hand went to his gun. Ellen put her hand on his wrist. She shook her head. Once. Hard. She pointed, instead, at the back door, which they had come in through. She pointed at the alley. She pointed at the rain. Wes hesitated. The voices were coming closer. Hartley was telling Riems to grab the bottle from the back room. Boots on the wood floor. Coming. Ellen moved first. She slipped through the back door into the alley. Wes was behind her in a heartbeat, pulling the door shut, easing the latch down so it would not click. The rain swallowed the sound. They were in the alley, against the wall, the ledger inside his coat. His heart pounding against her shoulder where she had pressed against him to stay out of the line of the small back window. Inside, Riems came into the back room. They could hear him through the door. They could hear him stop. A long pause. "Hartley," Riems called slowly. "Hartley, come here." Ellen's blood went cold. The desk drawer. They had left it open. Hartley, the drawer. Footsteps. Heavy. Running. A roar from the back room. Hartley's voice. No words in it. Just the sound a man makes when the floor has gone out from under his life. Then a window slammed open. Hartley's face. Red, wet eyes wild. Appeared at the back window not 10 feet from where they stood pressed against the wall. He saw them. He saw the ledger-shaped lump under Wes Tanner's coat. He saw Ellen Carver in her gray cleaning dress, standing in the rain beside a man Hartley had last seen 12 years ago, lying in a road in Beaumont Crossing with 4 bullets in him. Hartley's mouth opened. Wes Tanner drew. He did not fire. Wes Tanner had the pistol up and level and aimed at the center of Hartley's wet red face, and his finger was on the trigger, and the rain was hissing down between them, and he did not fire. Because Ellen had stepped in front of him. She did it the way she had done everything else in the last 2 days, without hesitation, without ceremony, the way a woman moves when the cost of moving has already been paid. "Not like this," she said very quietly over her shoulder. "Wes, not like this." Hartley's face was still in the window. He was not moving either. He was looking past Ellen at the pistol, and past the pistol at the eyes behind it. And Ellen could see in his face the exact moment Hartley understood that the man in the alley was not a stranger. Was not a stranger at all. "Tanner," Hartley breathed. Wes did not answer. Behind Hartley, Pastor Riems came into the back room. He saw the open drawer. He saw the empty space where the ledger had been. He saw Hartley at the window, frozen. He saw, past Hartley, the rain and the alley and a woman and a man, and his face went the color of paper. Riems ran. They heard him. Boots on the floor, the front door of the store slamming, the bell ringing once. Hard. Running into the rain. Toward the church. Toward the marshal's office at the far end of the street. Toward something, anything, away. Hartley did not run. Hartley reached under the counter and came up with a shotgun. Ellen saw it through the window. She did not step out of the way. "Wes!" she said. Now we go. Ellen. Now. She turned. She grabbed his sleeve. She pulled. And Wes Tanner, who had ridden 12 years to put a bullet in Hartley's face, let himself be pulled, because the woman pulling him was Ellen Hayes, and Ellen Hayes had buried him once already, and he had promised her at the fire that he would not make her bury anyone else. They ran. The shotgun went off behind them. The shot tore a chunk out of the alley wall 6 feet over their heads. They were already around the corner. Wes had the horse tied at the back of the church, the bay gelding saddled and ready, because they had planned for everything except for Hartley coming back early from his rounds. Wes threw Ellen up first. He came up behind her. The bay went from a stand to a run in 2 strides, and they were out of the alley, out of the town, out into the rain on the south road, and the ledger was inside Wes Tanner's coat, pressed between his chest and Ellen's back, and Ellen could feel her own heart and his heart and the heart of the horse all running at the same rhythm under the rain. Behind them, the town receded into gray. They rode 40 miles before they stopped. They rode through the rain and out of the rain and into a dry country where the sky cleared and the moon came up like a coin pulled out of a deep pocket. They rode to Lawton, and at dawn on Friday they walked into the federal marshal's office, and Wes Tanner laid the black ledger on the marshal's desk. And Ellen Carver, who had once been Ellen Hayes, sat down in the chair across from the marshal and told him, in a voice that did not shake, what was written on page 41. The marshal read the ledger. He read it for 2 hours. Then he sent 4 men to Dry Hollow. They found Hartley in his store, drunk, with the shotgun across his knees. He surrendered without firing. He was, in the end, a coward, and cowards who have spent 12 years pretending to be storekeepers do not have the fight in them when the law finally walks through the door. They found Pastor Riems hanging in the church. He had used a length of rope from the bell tower. He had left no note. The marshal said it was the cleanest confession he had ever seen, and he meant it without irony. Hartley was hanged in Lawton on a Wednesday in November. Ellen did not go to watch. She went home instead. She went home to the sagging house and the half-bitter well, and the 3 children who had been told only that their mother had gone to help the marshal with something important, and who had not asked more, because they were her children and they had learned young not to ask. But when she came up the road that Wednesday evening, with the sun going down red behind her and a man in a gray coat riding beside her, Sam was the first to see them from the porch. He stood up slowly. He looked at the man. He looked at his mother. He looked at the man again. "Mama," he said, "who is that?" Ellen got down off the wagon. She knelt in the dust in front of her son. "That," she said, "is a man I knew a long time ago, before you were born, before I was your mama. His name is Wes." Sam looked at Wes Tanner, who had taken off his hat and was holding it in both hands the way men hold hats when they have come to a door they are not sure they are allowed to walk through. "Is he staying?" Sam asked. Ellen looked back at Wes. The sun was very low. The light caught the 4 scars she could not see through his shirt but knew were there. The light caught the gray of his eyes, the color of a sky right before a storm, except the storm had passed now. The storm had passed 12 years ago, and they were only just walking out into the after of it. "That's up to him," Ellen said. "And up to you, and up to your sister and your brother, and up to me. We'll see." Sam thought about that. 9 years old, and he thought about it like a judge. "Are you hungry, mister?" he said at last. Wes Tanner, who had not been asked that question by a child in 12 years, could not for a moment make his mouth work. "Yes," he said, "I am." "Mama," Sam said, "there's still some of the flour left. The flour the man bought." "Yes," Ellen said, "there is." She stood up. She took Wes's hand, the second time in 12 years that she had taken it, and she led him up onto the sagging porch, and Mary came out of the door with Tom on her hip, and the 4 of them and the man in the gray coat went inside the house together, and the door closed behind them, and the sun went down on Dry Hollow. He had said it on the porch of Hartley's store 2 days before, in a voice no one else had heard. "Ride with me. I'll fill your table tonight." He had not been talking about the flour. What would you have done in her place? Opened the door or kept it closed? Wherever you are watching from tonight, friend. May your table be full, and may the ones you buried stay buried, and may the ones you didn't, somehow, find their way back to the porch. Ride safe.